Welcome back to Book Summary 5. I'm your host, Sammy, and today we're entering a battlefield that doesn't involve tanks or missiles, but silicon wafers, nanometers, and strategic supply chains. This is The World of Chip War by Chris Miller, a gripping, meticulously researched story about how microchips, those tiny slices of silicon that power everything from your phone to fighter jets, have become the most strategic resource of the 21st century. The premise is simple, yet monumental. Whoever controls the production and supply of advanced semiconductors controls the future. That's the war. Not one fought in deserts or oceans, but in clean rooms and labs, with consequences that ripple through global politics, economics, and even national security. The story begins in the mid-20th century, as the digital age is just beginning to flicker into life. The Cold War is in full swing, and military supremacy depends on who can calculate faster, navigate missiles more accurately, and build better satellites. Enter the semiconductor, a device that could shrink entire rooms of computing machinery into something the size of a shoebox. What unfolds from there is a fast-paced, deeply layered saga of invention, espionage, corporate rivalry, and national ambition. We meet the early pioneers, William Shockley, Robert Noyce, Gordon Moore, whose work at Bell Labs and later at Fairchild Semiconductor would give birth to Silicon Valley. These aren't just engineers, they're revolutionaries, building the foundations of modern computing. As the chip becomes smaller, faster, and cheaper, following Moore's law, its strategic value explodes. Countries realize that technological dominance will hinge not just on who can make chips, but who can control the full stack: design, fabrication, equipment, materials, and software. And it's here that the real war begins to take shape. Miller walks us through the rise of Intel, TSMC, Samsung, and ASML, showing how each player seized part of the value chain, and how America, once the undisputed champion of chip-making, gradually outsourced more and more of its capacity. This wasn't just about cost, it was about a series of decisions that prioritized design over fabrication, software over manufacturing. But while the US was looking to maximize margins, China was playing the long game. With enormous state funding and a relentless drive to reduce dependence on Western technology, China launched Made in China 2025, an ambitious plan to become self-sufficient in semiconductors and eventually dominate the global tech landscape. And yet, despite trillions poured into the effort, the most advanced chips remain out of reach for China, because the bottleneck is not money, but extreme technological complexity. For example, the most advanced fabrication equipment in the world, the EUV lithography machines needed to etch chips at the 5 nanometers and 3 nanometers levels, are made by ASML, a Dutch company. These machines cost over $150 million each and require cooperation from companies in Japan, Germany, and the US. No single country can replicate the full process alone. It's a web of dependencies and vulnerabilities. As Miller illustrates, chips are both the backbone of globalization and the Achilles heel of national defense. Military systems, stealth bombers, hypersonic weapons, secure communications, all depend on chips. But if supply chains are disrupted, or adversaries gain an edge, entire nations can be paralyzed. The COVID-19 pandemic brought this into sharp focus. Automakers halted production not because they lacked steel or rubber, but because they couldn't get enough semiconductors. Phones were delayed. Graphics cards disappeared. And the world realized just how fragile and how powerful the chip economy truly is. In response, the US government passed the CHIPS Act, pumping billions into revitalizing domestic semiconductor manufacturing. TSMC agreed to build a plant in Arizona. Intel pledged to expand in Ohio. But as Miller warns, this is not a race that can be won overnight. The knowledge, talent, and industrial infrastructure required to lead in chip-making takes decades to build, and only a handful of nations have ever done it. Meanwhile, the geopolitical stakes are rising. Taiwan, home to TSMC and the most advanced chip-making capabilities on Earth, becomes a flashpoint. China claims Taiwan as its own. The US vows to defend it. And suddenly, the fate of the world's tech supply, not to mention peace in the Pacific, seems to rest on an island smaller than the state of Maryland. Chris Miller does something remarkable with this book. He makes semiconductors thrilling. He makes you care about ion implantation, transistor gates, and supply chain bottlenecks because they're not just technical, they're political. They're about power. And as you turn the final pages, one thing becomes chillingly clear. The next great war might not be fought for oil or water, but for chips. So if you've ever wondered how your smartphone, your car, your laptop, and your government all depend on something you can't even see, chip war will change the way you look at the world. This is Sammy with Book Summary 5, and if there's one thing to take away from today's episode, it's this. The future isn't written in code, it's etched in silicon. Until next time, happy reading.